Welcome to the Bible and its Cultural Influence. I'm Seth Pace, and I've been teaching this class for about 8 years at Abilene High School in Abilene, Texas. It's a wonderful course that introduces students to the cultural influence, the art, the music, the heritage that we glean from the Bible and how it has influenced the Occidental world. So I will tell you that this began many years ago when I taught American Lit, and in the middle of our American Lit discussions, we were going over The Scarlet Letter by Nathaniel Hawthorne. And there's an amazing scene in it when the preacher looks up and sees a tapestry of David and Bathsheba on his wall. At that moment, I looked up at my class. I expected ahas and, a wonderful enlightenment little. But there wasn't. They stared at me. I expected enlightenment and understanding of the story, but instead they just stared at me. And whenever I polled the class of 28 kids, I found that only 3 of them had any knowledge of King David. At that moment, I realized that even though they had studied Greek and Roman mythology in 8th grade and 9th grade, and probably covered the Odyssey as a freshman, they did not have any true understanding of the stories from the biblical canon. So I decided to set up a 6 weeks project in my sophomore pre-AP World Lit class and teach them about biblical allusions. I think I started with 50 of the most popular or well-known biblical allusions. At the end of the 6 weeks, I had a group of students say, "Mr. Pace, will you teach us a class on this? Can you do a class?" And I decided to attempt that because I knew that a few years earlier, back in 2007, we had State House Bill number 1287 being put forth that says, as you can see, that an elective course on the Bible's Hebrew Scriptures, Old Testament, New Testament, their impact on the history and literature of Western civilization. So we could offer it. Now, the Bible has never been outside of English classes. Even though some English teachers and history teachers have been hesitant to use it, it's always been a source that we could use for literature, for poetry, for stories. We could talk about the historical impact of it from Old, or what we call the Old Testament, which is actually the Hebrew text and the Greek text. So I taught the class, and I've been teaching the class ever since, and my smallest numbers have been around 20, one class of 20, and the largest numbers I've had have been in the 70s. It's been a wonderful blessing in my life to be able to teach this and to get the interactions between students. And one of the things that I think is necessary is the biblical allusions that you learn. As I tell kids, the reason we learn about allusions in literature, there are 3 types. We have biblical allusions, we have historical allusions, and then we have artistic or literary allusions. And you must understand all of these, because as a writer and as someone who's striving to be intellectual, allusions add so much depth and weight to a conversation. So when a writer comes in and simply says it was forbidden fruit, if you know the story of Adam and Eve, if you know the story of the fall of mankind and how they were offered the forbidden fruit by the serpent, that adds so much more depth and richness to the story. So poets especially really enjoy doing this with illusions because you can add so much weight in so few words. And it's a powerful tool to know. Similarly, if you are set with a difficult task at work, if you understand the difference between a Herculean task and a Sisyphean task, then there's an immense level of blah, 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 blah. If you make There's an immense amount of difference between a Herculean task and a Sisyphean task. And if you don't know the difference between the two, if you don't know the stories that those terms are based on, then you miss out. It's as if you were given, instead of a cup of really dark, rich coffee that has all sorts of hints and flavors that linger in your mouth, instead you're giving just basically water that's had an old tea bag dipped into it. If you don't understand illusions, all types of illusions, you're missing out on a huge palette of understanding and depth to knowledge in our Western world. And that's what this class is for. So, we'll begin a series of lectures So now let us continue a series of lectures over topics and stories found in the Greek text and several special topics that we'll get into later, and see if we can enrich our lives, our understanding, and our conversations. Thank you for listening to this brief introduction, and shalom.